Are you soft inside? What makes you melt?
Am I soft inside? What makes me melt? I don't know, it's a bit personal for me.
Like, do you...
For most people, Jason Statham isn't just an actor, he's a myth. He's the stone-faced Brit whose punches land like statements and whose stunts seem powered by something more stubborn than fear. But behind that image is a far less cinematic list most fans never see. Cracked ribs from mistimed falls, shoulder strains from impacts he insisted on taking himself, whiplash from car rigs pushed a little too far, and late-night visits to medical trailers that never end up in interviews. Studios call it authenticity. Doctors call it accumulated trauma. Jason calls it doing the job. Now, in his late 50s, the same body that built his legend is starting to show the price of decades spent choosing the most dangerous version of every scene. Fans watch him walk through explosions. His family watches him limp upstairs afterward. And the question hanging over every new film isn't, how big is the stunt? It's, what happens when the man built on being unbreakable finally breaks? Jason Statham didn't come from a place that made fame easy. He grew up in Shirebrook, a mining town in Derbyshire, where the streets were lined not with agents or opportunities, but with men whose lungs and backs had paid for every pound they earned. His mother, Eileen, danced for a living in pubs and clubs, adding light to places that desperately needed it. His father, Barry, worked any job that kept the family afloat, painting houses, digging coal, selling whatever he could grab wholesale, even crooning in run-down holiday bars when money dried up. Their home wasn't glamorous, but it pulsed with motion. Arguments about bills came and went, but so did resilience. Young Jason watched his dad hustle in the markets and his mum perform under cheap lights, learning something vital. Survival requires both grit and showmanship. That blend of toughness and performance didn't just shape his childhood, it became the backbone of the persona the world later mistook for invincibility. When the Stathams moved to Great Yarmouth, the family business seemed to be waiting for Jason. Barry set up stalls along the seafront, selling perfumes, trinkets, and anything that could be flipped for a margin. Jason was expected to slide naturally into that world, to learn how to read hesitation on a stranger's face, how to close a sale before they walked away. Instead, he drifted towards something entirely different: martial arts. While friends hung around arcades and food stalls, Jason spent hours in dojos, practicing Chinese martial arts, kickboxing, and karate, drilling techniques until sweat soaked the mats. Adults who looked at the weekly food budget didn't see it as ambition, they saw it as distraction. But inside those training halls, he was learning timing, discipline, and how to stay calm when someone bigger tried to drop him. The markets taught him human psychology. The dojo taught him mastery under pressure. Together, those two environments created the controlled intensity that later became his trademark screen presence. Diving changed him more than anything else. What started as a hobby turned into 12 years of relentless training with Britain's national squad. Mornings began with conditioning, afternoons with drilling dives from 1, 3, and 10 meters, and evenings with aching muscles that promised tomorrow would hurt more. Every motion had to be perfect, no hesitation, no panic. In 1990, he walked into the Commonwealth Games in Auckland, representing England, hoping to turn all that pain into medals. Instead, he finished 8th, 11th, and outside the spotlight. No podium, no Olympic invitation. Years later, he admitted those scores still sting, not because he expected gold, but because he knew how much of his life he'd given to the water. Yet the failure carved something useful into him. It taught him that discipline doesn't guarantee victory, and fear must be controlled, not avoided. And it left him with rare skills, air awareness, body control, and an ability to stay calm underwater that would one day help him survive a stunt gone wrong. After diving ended, modeling came knocking, but it wasn't the golden doorway people imagine. Agencies noticed his athletic build and threw him into campaigns for Tommy Hilfiger, Levi's, and Griffin. Followed by a gritty turn as the face of French Connection, the posters looked glamorous. His bank account didn't. Between shoots that paid little and came unpredictably, he slipped back to what he knew best: hustling. On London pavements, he sold knockoff perfume, cheap watches, and anything that sparkled enough to fool a tourist. He learned how to talk fast, steer conversations, and walk away before a buyer realized the bottle they'd bought smelled nothing like the brand printed on the box. That double life, billboards by day, counterfeit goods by night, sharpened the look people would one day call classic Statham. The cold stare wasn't a pose. It was a survival skill, born from the knowledge that if he flinched, hesitated, or looked unsure, he wouldn't eat. Long before cinema gave him enemies to break, real life had already taught him not to blink. Before Jason Statham was leaping off buses or choking out villains, he was dancing half-naked in early 90 seconds music videos. Acts like The Shaman and Erasure hired him as a muscular, unpredictable presence: oiled skin, leopard print briefs, club lighting flashing across his face. For many actors, those clips would be an embarrassing footnote, something to bury under later success. But Jason didn't hide from them. He learned from them. Those chaotic sets forced him to ignore cameras, commit fully to ridiculous ideas, and perform without self-consciousness. He discovered how to move with confidence in front of strangers, how to let his body tell a story long before he had lines to speak. That raw physicality, the ability to look intense, silly, dangerous, or unshakably calm at will, became part of his on-screen DNA. Years later, when directors asked him to slide across oil-covered floors or fight on moving vehicles, he didn't freeze up. He'd already danced through strobe-lit madness. Compared to that, action movies almost felt predictable. The turning point came through an unexpected mix of fashion and street grit. While working on a French Connection campaign, Jason met director Guy Ritchie, who was hunting for real toughness, not acting school bravado, for his new film Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. Instead of giving Jason a script, Ritchie handed him a pile of fake watches and told him to sell them. It was the one audition Jason didn't need to prepare for. He'd lived it since childhood. His patter flipped on instantly. Confident grin, quick jokes, fast hands. The rhythm of someone who could convince a stranger that cheap metal was treasure. Ritchie watched, impressed by something he couldn't teach: authentic menace wrapped in charm. Jason landed the role of Bacon on the spot. The paycheck was tiny, but the opportunity was massive. That moment took him from anonymous street hustler and struggling model to a man who suddenly had a lane in cinema carved directly from the life he'd survived. Lock, Stock didn't make Jason rich, but it made him unforgettable. His performance felt lived in, like he wasn't acting a hustler, he was simply being one on camera. 2 years later, Ritchie cast him again in Snatch, this time as Turkish, the tired boxing promoter narrating insanity with dead-eyed calm. The pay was still modest, nowhere near the blockbuster salaries waiting in his future, but his credibility skyrocketed. Audiences were drawn to the way he spoke, like every line was carved from experience, not rehearsal. He wasn't glamorous, he wasn't polished, and he wasn't pretending. He was real, in a genre full of people trying too hard to look tough. Casting directors suddenly saw him as the man who could anchor a chaotic crime world simply by walking into a frame. Those early roles didn't buy mansions, but they built something far more valuable: a reputation for authenticity that money can't fake and that Hollywood desperately needed. In 2002, everything shifted. The Transporter wasn't just another gig, it was the film that demanded Jason carry the entire story with nothing but precision, attitude, and pain tolerance. As Frank Martin, a calm, rule-driven driver who becomes lethal the moment someone crosses him, Jason finally had a role tailored to his strengths. The choreography blended martial arts with kinetic European action, letting him punch, kick, and flip with a discipline shaped by years of training. Then came the now famous oil fight scene, where he slid across a slick floor, dismantling attackers with athletic precision that no stunt double could replicate. Off camera, he pushed to do as much of the fighting and driving himself as insurance would allow, arguing that audiences could spot the difference instantly. That decision turned his body into a franchise machine, equal parts actor, athlete, and battering ram. The Transporter didn't just launch a trilogy, it launched the myth of Jason Statham as the man who didn't need movie magic to look dangerous. As Jason's star rose, so did the intensity of the stunts he insisted on performing. In films like Crank, War, and Death Race, he wasn't just throwing punches, he was doing it on moving cars, scaffolding, rooftops, and aircraft rigs. On Crank, he clung to a helicopter mid-air, battling above the city while the wind hammered his face. Coordinators later admitted the sequence bordered on reckless, the kind of thing other actors would never be cleared to attempt. But Jason kept choosing the harder path. Fewer pads, fewer doubles, more impact, more danger. He believed realism mattered, that audiences could feel authenticity in every hit, and that choosing the easy version would cheapen the story. The line between commitment and self-harm blurred. Every time he walked away from a brutal stunt, applause followed, but so did another unseen injury added to a growing list. His legend grew, but so did the quiet toll his skeleton and nerves were forced to absorb. The moment that nearly ended Jason Statham's career and his life happened far from Hollywood glamour. During the Expendables 3 shoot in Bulgaria, he was rehearsing a simple stunt: drive a 3-ton truck along a pier and brake hard before the edge. But when he hit the pedal, nothing happened. The vehicle didn't slow, it accelerated. Crew members shouted as the truck plowed straight off the pier and plunged into the Black Sea. For a few terrifying seconds, Jason was trapped in a sinking metal coffin, weighed down by boots, gear, and the sheer force of the drop. Most people would have panicked, but years of competitive diving took over. He kept calm, found an opening, and swam out as the truck disappeared below. His co-stars later admitted he should have died that day. Jason shrugged it off in interviews as a nasty experience. But everyone on set understood the truth. The same dedication that built his legend had finally shown its teeth. And for the first time, Jason had come face to face with what pushing too far really looks like. Surviving a stunt that almost killed him didn't soften Jason's opinions, it sharpened them. In a now famous interview, he fired a shot straight at Hollywood's most profitable machine, the superhero industry. He criticized actors who rely heavily on stunt doubles yet take full credit for the action, calling the practice misleading and hinting that some performances were basically smoke and mirrors. It wasn't a polished PR statement, it was Jason refusing to pretend. Stunt performers quietly loved him for it. Studio publicists, not so much. The comment drew a line between him and the polished, CGI-sanitized heroes dominating box offices. And it boxed him into a corner because once you position yourself as the guy who does it for real, you can't suddenly pull back and say, "Actually, I'll let someone safer take this hit." The industry wanted bigger risks. Fans expected authenticity. And Jason had set a standard he felt obligated to maintain. His words became a challenge to himself as much as everyone else. Films like The Bank Job and Death Race pushed Jason into darker, grittier territory, where realism wasn't just preferred, it was demanded. The Bank Job leaned into real events, weaving whispers of government cover-ups and stolen royal photos into a heist story that felt uncomfortably close to truth. Jason approached it like a man stepping into someone else's dangerous memories, playing a thief who wasn't glamorous or bulletproof, but desperate and cornered. Then came Death Race, a violent, steel-crunching spectacle where he strapped into weaponized vehicles and collided through blazing gauntlets that left censors unsettled. Some scenes had to be trimmed for being too brutal. Others barely passed the ratings board. Jason didn't flinch. He embraced the chaos, the noise, the physicality. These weren't polished superhero battles. They were dirt, metal, and impact. And with each production, He walked away carrying just a little more damage. The films cemented his reputation as the king of raw action, but they also blurred the line between cinema and punishment. When Jason entered the Fast and Furious universe as Deckard Shaw, he wasn't just stepping into another franchise, he was stepping into a global machine with its own mythology. These films had evolved into physics-defying spectacles, and adding Statham, a man known for doing it for real, instantly elevated the stakes. His fight scenes were brutal masterpieces, tight corridors, shattered glass, bone-jolting impact delivered with cold precision. Fans loved the mix of menace and dry humor that made his villainy strangely irresistible. Off-camera, something else was happening. Jason became a vocal advocate for stunt teams. When a performer suffered a severe injury on a later Fast set, he publicly demanded more recognition and safety for the people who take the real hits. It made him a hero among crews, but it also highlighted a strange irony. Jason was campaigning for stunt performers while still refusing to use them for most of his own scenes. He was a paradox, both the reason stunt teams were celebrated and the reason they weren't always called in. Then came The Meg, a blockbuster that pushed Jason into a different kind of danger, one that didn't involve fists or engines, but deep, dark water. Playing a rescue diver facing a prehistoric giant shark sounded like popcorn fun, but the shoot was far more demanding. Long hours in underwater tanks forced him to rely on breath control and composure, while surrounded by heavy machinery, hydraulic rigs, and cages that could trap a limb with one wrong movement. Communication underwater became little more than hand signals and trust. Malfunctions happened. Takes ran long. There were moments when surfacing took seconds longer than comfort allowed, and even a former national-level diver could feel panic pressing at the edges. Jason played it cool, joking about sharks in interviews, but behind the humor was something real: respect for the ocean and fear of what lurks beneath. CGI may have created the monster, but the danger he faced in those tanks was no less authentic. For once, the threat wasn't a stunt gone wrong, it was nature, machinery, and human vulnerability colliding in the dark. By 2024, most action stars his age were easing into mentor roles, appearing as grizzled commanders, retired assassins, or symbolic cameos. Jason Statham chose the opposite. He signed on to The Beekeeper, a revenge thriller that sounded modest on paper. A former government operative taking down a scam network that targeted the wrong person. But once the film hit screens, it detonated. Audiences weren't looking for superheroes. They wanted someone who punched like the world owed him money. Jason delivered that in every frame, tight, brutal choreography that felt personal. Like he wasn't just fighting villains, but the entire concept of exploitation. The film made more than quadruple its budget and quickly became one of the year's surprise hits. It wasn't flashy, and it didn't need to be. Statham's performance proved something simple but powerful. As long as people believe the danger is real, he doesn't need capes, CGI, or multiverses. All he needs is a mission, a reason, and that cold, quiet intensity only he can pull off. Statham's next move felt like a return to his roots. A working man, adapted from Chuck Dixon's novel Levon's Trade. Directed by David Ayer and shaped heavily by Sylvester Stallone, the film gave Jason a role that wasn't just about violence, but about the weight a man carries when violence is the only language he has left. As Levon Cade, he plays a construction worker with a black ops past who tries to leave that world behind until a girl disappears and forces him back into the shadows he hoped to escape. The action is close, and ugly pipes, tools, fists, meeting bone. The kind of combat that feels improvised, not choreographed. Audiences responded instantly. The film opened at number 1, surprising critics who assumed old-school revenge thrillers were fading. But Levon wasn't a superhero. He was a human being crushed by responsibility. For Jason, it was a deeper, more wounded character, a reminder that the most dangerous men aren't always the loudest. They're the ones trying hardest to stay quiet. With age came something Jason never expected to become, a protector behind the scenes. After decades of insisting on doing the wildest stunts himself, he slowly shifted into a mentor role for younger performers. Crew members began noticing how he stayed. After rehearsals, offering tactical adjustments that made falls safer and impacts cleaner. He pushed for better medical staffing on sets and regularly checked in on new stunt workers who looked nervous before a big hit. He also became one of Hollywood's loudest voices, demanding an Oscar category for stunt teams, something he believes is long overdue. Yet, this transformation wasn't hypocrisy. It was maturity. He still pushes himself, still takes risks, but now he understands the cost. Jason has seen too many near misses, too many talented performers sidelined by injuries that could have been avoided. And while he'll never fully stop doing what made him famous, he now carries a responsibility he once ignored. Ensuring the next generation doesn't pay the same physical price. Jason Statham's career isn't defined only by the roles he accepted. It's just as shaped by the ones he walked away from. Over the years, he turned down prestige projects, dramatic auditions, and even discussions about stepping into the iconic James Bond franchise. On paper, those refusals seem baffling. But Jason has always known his strengths: blunt force charisma, street-born intensity, and authenticity over theatrics. He once joked that if he ever played Bond, there'd be fewer tuxedos and far more broken noses. Those choices cost him access to the high art circles Hollywood worships, but they also protected his identity. While other actors chased versatility, he built a brand so clear that audiences instantly knew what they were buying. Grit, danger, and a promise that the fight scenes will look real because the pain often is. Statham isn't a chameleon, he's a specialist. And sometimes specialists outlast the shapeshifters. His lane may be narrow, but he carved it out with scars, sweat, and stubborn pride. Away from the explosions and steel, Jason Statham's personal life has been far less controlled than any stunt sequence. Before he found stability, he moved through Epson, public breakups, paparazzi ambushes, and headlines that twisted private moments into feeding material for tabloids. Eventually, he found steadiness with Rosie Huntington-Whiteley, a relationship built on mutual ambition, thick skin, and the ability to endure being followed everywhere. Together, they raised 2 children while juggling filming schedules across continents. Fame didn't make parenting easier. If anything, it made every decision heavier. A minor injury on set suddenly had consequences at home. A dangerous stunt wasn't just a cool story. It was a risk with tiny eyes watching. Friends say fatherhood softened him without weakening him. It made him calculate more, pause more, and look past the stunt to the years he still wants to live. He still does the work, still takes hits, but now when he walks onto a set, he brings not just experience, but responsibility. And that might be the biggest shift of all. By 2025, Jason Statham had survived collapsing sets, runaway vehicles, near drownings, and enough stunt mishaps to fill a medical textbook. But then, the digital world decided to kill him anyway. Out of nowhere, social media pages began posting "Rip Jason Statham" banners with solemn music, fake quotes from co-stars, and AI-edited images showing him in memorial black and white. Some claimed he died in a Texas flood, others said a violent car crash, and a few insisted he'd passed away on set. None of it was true, but the posts spread like wildfire because the algorithm rewards tragedy more than truth. Fans panicked. News outlets scrambled. Meanwhile, Jason was very much alive, training, filming, and posting vacation photos. The hoaxes became a dark joke, a reminder that in the age of viral lies, someone can die without taking a single breath. For a man who built his career surviving impossible scenarios, being declared dead by bored teenagers online might have been the most absurd threat he ever faced. Jason Statham's filmography tells one story. His injuries tell another. Years of high-impact stunts have layered his body with quiet reminders of the chaos he's endured. Rib fractures that ache when the weather shifts, jaw tension from repeated hits, lingering whiplash from crashes, and scars hidden beneath costumes that fans never see. He brushes them off in interviews the way working-class men brush off workplace injuries casually, almost apologetically. But crew members have described moments between takes when he sits a little slower, breathes a little deeper, or stretches a joint with the kind of patience that only pain teaches. Over time, the toll has become less hypothetical and more permanent. He's admitted, half joking, that some early choices were not my brightest ideas. Though his eyes give away the truth, there are consequences to carrying your own legend. The real question now isn't whether he can do another brutal stunt. It's how many more his bones, tendons, and nerves can absorb before the bill finally comes due. When you add up the worldwide earnings of every film Jason Statham has appeared in, from gritty British crime classics to shark thrillers and supercharged franchises, you land somewhere north of $8.5 billion. That's the GDP of a small country powered almost entirely by grit, rage, and expertly thrown roundhouse kicks. Hollywood sees that number as proof of a bankable formula. Fans see it as validation of a man who never cheats the camera. But hidden inside that staggering figure is a pressure cooker few actors ever face. When your reputation is built on doing it for real, everyone expects the next stunt to be bigger, crazier, and more dangerous than the last. Studios lean on your brand. Marketing teams hint at behind-the-scenes insanity. Audiences crave authenticity. And the only person paying the physical interest on that demand is the man standing in the center of it. 8 billion looks great in headlines, but it doesn't soften impacts or heal bruises. Watching Jason Statham age hits differently because his entire career has been built on real risk. CGI heroes don't get older, they get digitally refreshed. But Jason? You can see the years in his shoulders, the stiffness in his walk, the slight carefulness when he lowers himself into a chair during interviews. He isn't frail, not even close, but he's no longer the indestructible force he played 20 years ago. That reality forces a difficult question. How does a man who built his identity on being unbreakable transition into the phase of life where caution matters? Fans want classic Statham forever. Loved ones want him intact for the next 40 years. Even Jason seems caught between the two, still pushing himself because he knows audiences expect it, yet increasingly aware of the body he must preserve. Perhaps the hardest opponent he's ever faced isn't a villain, a shark, or a runaway truck. It's time. And unlike movie enemies, time doesn't rehearse or reset. If you look at Jason Statham's life from a distance, it resembles a series of dives, literal ones from his days as a competitive athlete and metaphorical ones off rooftops, rigs, vehicles, and into scenes most actors would run from. Each leap required trust, discipline, and a willingness to risk something essential. And every time, he surfaced. That's why audiences believe he's unkillable. But even the strongest diver eventually stops climbing the platform, not out of fear, but wisdom. Jason's greatest stunt may not be another explosion or perfectly executed fight sequence. It may be the moment he decides to step back, teach instead of absorb the impact, and pass on the brutal lessons carved into his bones. Because legacies aren't built only on what a man survives, they're built on what he chooses to leave behind. And if you want to see how that chapter begins, make sure you're here for the next video. Something big is coming, and I won't want to miss where his story goes next.